China's real estate sector takes another hit, but this time it is an Evergrande. Developer Kaisa is now making a desperate plea for help. Risk or opportunity? Investment bank Goldman Sachs is weighing those options and buying up Chinese real estate debt. The U.S. is working to block American investments from funding China's military. A ban on investing in nearly 60 Chinese companies gets an extension. 13 U.S. officials paid Taiwan a visit. In a meeting there, the delegation discussed Taiwan's defense capabilities amid China's growing military pressure. And 2/3 of Chinese provinces have been hit by the CCP virus. In some places, authorities are even forcing locals to drink a certain medical brew. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. First, we look to China's real estate sector as it takes another pounding. Besides Evergrande, a different giant is making a desperate plea for help. Its credit rating has plummeted, and the U.S. Federal Reserve sent out its first direct warning about potential global damage. Let's look at the details.
There were fresh signs Tuesday that China's property sector faces mounting trouble. Ailing developer Kaisa Group has said it needs help to pay investors, workers and suppliers. That is according to a Reuters source. China's real estate sector has been hit by a liquidity squeeze as investors worry over the viability of some firms. The concerns were first sparked by Evergrande, the world's most indebted developer. It's already missed some debt payments. Now Kingston Securities Executive Director Dickie Wong says more will follow it and Kaisa into trouble.
I would expect more smaller Chinese property developers, they may follow their footsteps. They may not be able to pay the repayment of financial products as well as US dollars denominated debt as well. So I would expect more and more Chinese property developer follow up.
Ratings agency Fitch on Tuesday downgraded Kaisa, citing its worsening liquidity. The firm is only China's 25th largest developer by sales, but it has the most offshore debt of any such firm bar Evergrande. And there is concern that problems could ripple right through the country's $5 trillion property sector. On Monday, the US Federal Reserve said that stresses in China's real estate market could pose risks to the US financial system. The next big test comes on Wednesday, by when Evergrande has to make some overdue debt payments.
Kaisa's credit level has been cut 2 steps from CCC+ to CCC- by Fitch Ratings, one of the world's top credit rating agencies. The label means the company carries an extremely high investment risk. Another Chinese real estate company is struggling to pay back its debt. Developer Fantasia saw its shares plunge 50%. That's after the company said it can't promise to pay back other debts. Fantasia already missed a $200 million payment due October 4th. All this set against a backdrop of mounting debt pressure in China's real estate sector. Over the years, the sector accumulated around $5 trillion of debt before Beijing set a cap on how much they can borrow. Chinese developers have to pay back over $90 billion next year, and some analysts say more than a third could have difficulty paying their debt. As for Fantasia, it says it's negotiating with some lenders about pushing back the due date for paying its loans. Also on the financial front, China's now infamous real estate developer Evergrande is back in the hot seat. The company has become the most high-profile example of major debt crisis in the sector, but now faces even more challenges. The Chinese real estate developer was due to pay an about $150 million bond coupon on Wednesday, but some bondholders didn't receive their payments by the end of the business day in Asia. What's more, the company is also looking down the barrel of about $8 billion worth of debt obligations to foreign investors over the next year. And its founder may have to pay at least part of that debt out of his own pocket. Hong Kong media reports that Evergrande chairman Xi Jiaying is using 2 luxury mansions in the city as collateral to get bank loans. One of the properties is valued at $100 million US. As Evergrande grapples with the weight of its obligations, Chinese real estate debts have become one of the most troubled assets in the global financial market. But one of the world's biggest investment banks seems to see it as an opportunity and is buying up those debts in droves. Angus Bell is a member of Goldman's portfolio management team. He told Bloomberg that the property sector has been the key driver of Chinese growth over the past 2 decades. It is unlikely the government will tolerate the impact on growth that would come about if it were to allow such a large number of developers to fail. So what exactly is Goldman Sachs doing? Bell said the financial institution has been buying high-yield bonds issued by Chinese property developers in U.S. dollars. That's on top of investing in the Chinese regime's local currency bonds. U.S. President Biden is extending a ban that former President Trump put in place. It stops the U.S. from investing in Chinese companies that are believed to be owned by the Chinese military. NTD's Kevin Hogan has more.
On Tuesday, Biden said the Chinese regime is increasingly exploiting capital from U.S. investments. He said Beijing is using it to modernize its military, which threatens the U.S. and its forces overseas. That's according to a letter Biden wrote to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. This letter extends the national emergency the previous administration put in place to address this threat. Former President Trump's order targeted U.S. investment firms and pension funds. It was designed to stop them from buying shares in specific Chinese firms, the ones the Defense Department says are backed by the Chinese military. Biden has extended the emergency for 1 year until November 12, 2022.
About 60 Chinese companies are on the blacklist, including telecom network suppliers Huawei and ZTE, and state-owned video surveillance manufacturer Hikvision. The blacklist also includes China's leading chipmaker Semiconductor Manufacturing International Corporation and the national oil company CNOOC. Under the regime's national strategy known as civil-military fusion, Beijing has been leveraging private sector technological innovations to advance its defense capabilities. And as production costs rise in China and transporting products gets harder and more expensive, clothing companies are moving production closer to U.S. and European stores. Here's more.
Large fashion brands are pulling production out of Asia. Italian fashion company Benetton, for example, moved more than 10% of its production out of Asia and into Europe. One factory owner in Bosnia says his shoe business has seen an increase in demand.
Tens of companies have contacted us already.
Some manufacturers regard this shift as an exceptional opportunity.
It is a chance for us to increase the production, to increase the capacity.
And Hugo Boss also plans to shift production closer to final markets. All these strategic transitions will give firms more control over the production process and transport costs. The CEO of Future and Design, Nicolina Womack, says many people just see the cheap labor in Asia, but overlook all the other costs.
Because a lot of times they're not thinking of tariffs, they're not thinking of container shipping costs, they're not thinking of the amount of, again, that minimum order quantities that you need to be able to hit for it to make sense. You're not counting the inventory and the warehousing costs.
Womack's company is based in Utah.
You have it manufactured here, then we can also have it shipped directly to the customer. And so then you have 2-day shipping, 3-day shipping. The cost on that is significantly less.
Local manufacturing also benefits the community.
You as a brand and a consumer are able to help pay better wages for these individuals that are manufacturing.
It also reduces the carbon footprint.
Shipping container, ocean shipping counts for 18% of our total water pollution. When you do nearshoring or onshoring, you cut that out altogether.
The fashion industry's shift gives brands more flexibility to cope with bottlenecks in the supply chain. Faye Quarter, NTD News.
And it's not just fashion houses making the shift. Right now, China dominates the drone market. The rest of the world doesn't even come close. But now American drone makers are trying to rely less on China. Here's more.
American drone makers are trying to rely less on China, which currently dominates the industry. NTD spoke with drone maker Arthur Erickson to learn more.
China started utilizing drone technology for agriculture, for infrastructure inspection, even in military aspects and things like that, sooner and more profoundly than us in the Western world. They're ahead of us in a lot of ways in that industry, and we're just now realizing, the Western countries here, we're just now realizing how important drone technology really is going to be for the future of a bunch of different industries.
Erickson is the CEO of Helio, which makes precision crop spraying drones. He says drones will touch almost every facet of modern life, including agriculture, logistics, cargo, military, security, media, and so on.
China historically has had a near monopoly on a lot of the raw materials that are utilized in the drone industry, a lot of the magnetic materials, a lot of the lithium that makes the batteries that power the drones. They've controlled a lot of the flow of that raw material. Now, a lot of American companies, including ours, are searching for alternative routes for those raw materials.
And the consequences of letting China take the lead may be huge. Currently, the most dominant drone manufacturer in China is DJI.
The police forces and fire departments and whatnot of this country, the United States, also just turned to DJI. There's some reports to suggest that a lot of this data that these police stations and these fire departments were capturing has been transferred unknowingly back to certain government elements in China.
The New York City Police Department still uses them despite the concerns. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
The supply chain crisis is affecting the pharmaceutical industry in the U.S. Some basic drugs like insulin are running low across the country, and 90% of the global supply of the key materials to make generic drugs for the world are centralized in one single country. NTD's Colin Fredrickson has the details.
Supply chain bottlenecks are impacting everything, from clothes to electronics, and now drugs. The FDA says there are currently over 100 drug shortages, from the anesthetic lidocaine to anti-smoking treatment Chantix to epinephrine, which treats life-threatening allergic reactions.
Oh, the impact on patients is very real.
One expert thinks the real situation could be even worse.
And now, with the supply chain disruptions off of California, with so many products coming from China and other countries, the situation could be potentially much worse.
Rosemary Gibson, the author of China RX, says America relies too much on one country for our medicine supply.
And just remember that 90% of the global supply of the key materials to make generic drugs for the world are centralized in a single country, China. So I do think that the situation is much, much worse than what the FDA is saying.
Gibson says there's an urgent need to bring pharmaceutical production back.
If we could make these products in our own countries, we would not be having these shortages. That's what every single country should do. And we could change the market overnight.
The report also mentions other reasons, like some of the drugs are in high demand, encountering manufacturing delays, or have been discontinued. Colin Fredrickson, NTD News.
And on Wednesday, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken confirmed the United States and its allies would take unspecified action to protect Taiwan. That's if China was to use force to alter the status quo with the island. That mainly refers to a possible military invasion. The communist regime in Beijing has never ruled out the possibility and has ramped up displays of force over the island. Taiwan currently enjoys its own democratically elected officials and is governed by its own constitution. A group of U.S. congressmen visited Taiwan via a military plane on Tuesday. The lawmakers met with senior Taiwanese officials, even President Tsai Ing-wen. But China is voicing strong opposition to the trip. The visit was unannounced. It was first confirmed by Taiwan's foreign ministry, while the Pentagon verified the report later. After arriving, the 13-member congressional delegation discussed Taiwan's defense capabilities amid growing military threats from Beijing. Taiwanese media reported that the congressman arrived on a U.S. C-40 Clipper military transport plane. Taiwan's premier expressed gratitude for the visit, thanking the U.S. for voicing its support for Taiwan in various international arenas. On the other hand, the visit angered China's defense ministry. In a statement, a spokesperson accused the United States of having grossly interfered in China's internal affairs. But the Pentagon called the meeting normal practice and stated that congressional delegation visits to Taiwan are fairly routine. The visit marks the third time a U.S. delegation has visited the self-ruled island since Biden took office. Many have heard about China's vaccine diplomacy, but what a lot of people overlook is that China's vaccine diplomacy also includes gifting doses directly to foreign countries' militaries. An estimate by the Wall Street Journal puts the number of shots the Chinese military, the People's Liberation Army, has donated to other militaries at more than 1 million. Beneficiaries include countries that are part of China's Belt and Road Project, like Zimbabwe and Ethiopia. African countries such as Sudan and Tunisia received the gifted jabs gratefully, and other recipients include the Vietnamese and Filipino military. Helena Lagarda, who studies Chinese defense policy at Mercator Institute for China Studies, told the Journal that in terms of soft power, there's nothing better than healthcare and education, and that in many countries, militaries are powerful, influential political actors. So it's never a bad thing to build ties with them. Lagarda also says that no armed force has donated vaccines directly to other militaries at such a large scale. The U.S. military has not given COVID-19 shots directly to foreign allies' militaries. It looks like China may have a long way to go towards its pandemic goal, achieving 0 cases of the Chinese Communist Party virus, which causes COVID-19. From last month till now, 21 Chinese provinces have discovered new patients. NTD's Don Ma has more.
New virus cases continue to crop up in China. Jilin is the latest province to be added to the list of affected provinces in the country. With that, the virus has now reached a total of 21 provinces as of last month. That's more than 2/3 of Chinese provinces. What's more, among those 21 provinces, close to 90 districts are now labeled as medium or high-risk areas for contracting the virus. Looking at the current situation, China may be facing a steep uphill battle towards its goal of achieving 0 virus cases within the country. Nevertheless, it's a battle China is sparing no expense for. On Tuesday, Chinese health officials announced at a press conference that multiple rounds of large-scale virus testing were happening in Jiangxi province. That's after 47 new cases were found there. In one city in Hebei province, over 700 pandemic prevention vehicles were dispatched onto the streets. According to the Epoch Times, the vehicles were tasked with transporting virus patients and their close contacts. The massive number of them seen patrolling on streets made quite the spectacle, all for reportedly 11 new virus cases locally. While in Jilin province, authorities are enforcing strict virus control and prevention measures upon many districts, reportedly for a single new case. On Wednesday, China's National Health Commission reported 54 new cases in the country, though the Chinese regime has been known in the past to underreport virus cases. Don Ma, NTD News.
In some places in China, citizens are being forced to drink a certain medical brew. The authorities say it's a preventative measure against the pandemic, but they aren't telling people what's in it. It looks like this. The authorities go knocking on residents' doors with the brew. Then they film these people drinking it, saying it's proof that they really did drink the brew. People are not happy about this. A citizen shot this footage when the authorities came to his home and put it online. He complained that he had been healthy, but after taking the brew, he had many problems. And then he questioned the effect of the vaccines. At the end of the video, he asked the functionaries to drink the brew themselves and said he would film them, just as they had done to him and others. This may not be the first time Chinese authorities have done this. Last year, at the peak of the pandemic, there were also a number of reports of this kind all across China. There seem to be 2 different worlds portrayed online, one by the Chinese Communist Party's media and the other on social media. As the CCP's meeting of top officials kicked off, the regime's major media outlet published a lengthy homage listing Xi Jinping's so-called achievements, including developing diplomatic ties. The homage quoted Xi Jinping, saying, "Our friends are all over the world." The same day, a social media post started circulating. It lists Xi Jinping's diplomatic disasters this year. Let's take a look. Number 1, the EU-China investment agreement was suspended after 7 years of negotiations. China and the EU began talks about the agreement in 2013 in the hope of opening up trading relations. But the talk was suspended after Beijing introduced tit-for-tat sanctions. While human rights abuses in Xinjiang and Hong Kong worsened, the EU imposed sanctions in March on 4 Chinese officials involved in the mass persecution on Uyghurs. Beijing soon imposed counter-sanctions on several EU officials and 2 EU committees. The future of the agreement looks dim. As a professor at Brussels School of Governance, Michael Reiterer told The Guardian, as long as members of the European Parliament are on a sanction list, it is impossible. Number 2, the amount of U.S. blacklisted Chinese companies grew from 10 to 59. Chinese media haven't mentioned that the U.S. ban is due to the company's suspected ties to surveillance technology and defense. And when commenting, Chinese influencers simply say it's the result of U.S. hegemony. Number 3, the U.S. imposes stricter Chinese student visa restrictions out of national security concerns. The Chinese Communist Party media outlet China Daily reported in July that the U.S. denied visas to more than 500 Chinese graduate students in science and technology. The report labeled the rejections an extension of a U.S. policy of suppression. The tightened visa rules also apply to CCP members and their families. They are now limited to 1-month single-entry U.S. permits. The Post says this is the one that irritates Beijing officials the most. Number 4, the UK cut aid to China. Britain decided in April to cut its China aid budget by 95%. There is now a little over $1 million remaining for China human rights initiatives. The bright side, according to the Post, is that it's waking up many Chinese people. It is allowing many Chinese to realize that the regime has been receiving aid from developed countries for decades. That is something CCP media outlets don't tell the Chinese people. Number 5, the Post listed 3 cases. The first, Italy blocked a Chinese company from taking control of a Milan-based semiconductor manufacturer. The second, Ukraine shut down Beijing's attempt to buy its aero-engine giant Motor Sich. And third, in February, London revoked CCP media outlets CGTN's license to broadcast in the UK. The Post says it's odd that neither Chinese media nor the CCP wolf warriors have said a word of condemnation about these cases. Number 6 on the list is Beijing's ban on Australian coal. Beijing has officially embargoed Australian coal since late last year. Many believe one of the reasons is to punish Australia for demanding investigation into the CCP virus origin. However, China seems to be paying more now for this energy source. According to an Australian Strategic Policy Institute report, China's steel mills have to pay over $400 million for every million ton of coal. That's almost double the price compared with elsewhere. It also said the coal Beijing purchased from other countries are Australian coal, relabeled at higher prices. The Post says the process is twisted and embarrassing. And the list finally goes to the most recent event. That is, 32 countries decided to remove China from the preferential tariff treatment list from December. Beijing confirmed the decision with a public announcement. Beijing boasts that it's a sign of China's growth and competitiveness. However, a Taiwanese scholar takes it as a warning, saying it's to tell the CCP that what the CCP have done has undermined the fairness of world trade. The list could continue. A typical comment says this year is not over yet. There may be more surprises in the last few months. And that's all for today's China in Focus. But before you go, here's a short glimpse into this Friday's special report. The Chinese regime is hinting at war, from an amphibious landing exercise simulating an invasion across the Taiwan Strait, to increasing benefits for military members.
经中央军委主席习近平批准，实现军人配偶免费医疗，军官军事父母和配偶父母优惠医疗。
To making changes to a law that gives Communist leader Xi Jinping more power to mobilize the country and wage a war. A series of military-related moves by China is raising concerns. Some worry the Communist regime is already on track toward preparing the country to invade Taiwan. And it may not stop at Taiwan either.
A new Pentagon report underscoring the growing threat posed by Beijing saying China is accelerating its nuclear weapons program.
Is the regime seriously trying to mobilize its 1.4 billion people for an invasion on Taiwan? If so, how soon? Or are the threats aimed at launching an information war across the strait? And exactly where does the Taiwan issue come from? And why is it so critical?
Taiwan is a microcosm of really the dispositive issue of the 21st century.
We examine these questions and more in our next special report. Thanks for watching and see you tomorrow.